Welcome to the Under 8 podcast, the 3 times per week college basketball show brought to you in under 8 minutes. At the time of recording, it is Sunday, March 24th, 11:56 p.m. My name is Josh Mullenix. On today's pod, the top 8 seeds in the NCAA tournament all still dancing. We had some overtime action, and Clemson takes care of Baylor in the round of 32. It's all right now on the Under 8 podcast. Josh Doering here with me. Josh, about 30 minutes ago, the plan was to simply talk about how the top 8 seeds in the tournament have basically cruised to the Sweet 16. And while all 8 seeds will carry on into the second weekend, Houston making it a little bit more stressful than they would have liked. But the point is still the same, Josh. The top 8 seeds advance to the Sweet 16 and out of the first weekend of the NCAA tournament.
I made this my bold prediction and then immediately qualified it by saying, of course, this isn't actually going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually did.
Mm.
And I did say from the beginning, I really had a hard time convincing myself. Of course, upsets and things that don't make sense happen every single year. But just looking at these matchups, I had a hard time identifying one that I felt strongly about with these top 2 seeds going down before the Sweet 16. And usually there's one or two that I feel confident in predicting. Not that I always get it right, obviously, but I do think that there is something to be said for that. I don't know exactly how you felt. I think you were on a pretty similar spot where you just look at these and these 8 teams are just clearly, and maybe there's one or two others you can throw in there, and we'll discuss one of them later. But to me, these are just clearly the 8 teams that are a class above everybody else.
I think the thing that's even more surprising for me than anything else is like until the last 2 minutes of the Houston game, and I guess to a certain point with the Tennessee Texas game, even though I don't know, I never really felt like Texas was going to win that game. Maybe that's wrong of me in a 4-point game, but I never really thought that Texas was going to win that game. Apart from that, I mean, you look across the board and Arizona gets pushed by Dayton some, but it kind of felt like the whole time that Dayton just didn't quite have enough to keep up with Arizona. Purdue beat the absolute snot out of Utah State. They have the best player in the country. I don't know if you knew that, but they have the best player in the country. Marquette, goes toe to toe with Colorado. That might have been until what we just saw with Houston, Texas A&M.
That was
Not only has it been the top 8 seeds, but for the most part, it's a lot of UConn 75, Northwestern 58. North Carolina was clearly better than Michigan State, especially in the second half.
Yep.
And it's just been right. It's one of those things. I think it was fair to say those are clearly the 8 best teams in the country. And then you followed it up right with of course that's not going to happen. Somebody's going to get bit, right? And it hasn't really been the case.
No, yeah, you mentioned North Carolina. Once they decided to actually show up and play with some physicality, that game was over. It did take Hubert Davis really getting on his team, but they woke up and plenty of time took care of business. Yeah, Iowa State struggled in the first half and then took complete control of the second half, kind of like North Carolina, where you just over 40 minutes, it was clear who the better team was. Like you said, Marquette got tested. Certainly Tennessee couldn't shoot to save their lives. Delta Connect wasn't good. They still found a way to win. Whether that's good or bad will be an interesting conversation moving forward. But yeah, that is part of this. That UConn, I mean, that game was over from 2 minutes in. It seemed like when they jumped out to the lead, it really was just Houston. And one, previous Houston teams, I don't think win this game. They were terrible defensively. Primarily because they couldn't stop fouling.
Mm-hmm.
And you had, 3 guys foul out?
4.
Including 4, yeah, okay. Including Emmanuel Sharp, who has a great game, Jamal Shed, your most important player, and LJ Cryer, maybe your best offensive player. Oh, right, and Juwan Roberts too. So maybe your 4 most important players all fouled out.
Yep.
And if you're Texas A&M, yes, you're fortunate that the final play of regulation went the way it did, and that somehow that ball squeezed through everybody to get to the 3-point line, and that Anderson Garcia hit the shot, and that you had this opportunity to make this incredible comeback. And on the other end of the coin, if they could have hit some free throws, I mean, what were they, 50% in the first half? I think it was 11 of 22.
Mhm.
And then, of course, they were down double digits and had to rally. And who knows how this would have played out if they went 75% from the free throw line. They just left so many opportunities in a game where Houston was playing zone because they couldn't foul anymore because they didn't have players available between the injuries and the guys who were fouling out. They clearly were not comfortable in that zone. That was part of why they struggled so much defensively. There are plenty of holes to poke here. And also, if I'm Kelvin Sampson, I'm looking at this as the game we had to survive and the game we had to win in a weird, unconventional way.
Yep.
Because
it still took a massive collapse in the final 2 minutes of regulation to not win the game comfortably. Like
Right.
all of those things you just said are
Yep.
true.
Yep.
And Texas A&M had to make everything they looked at for 2 minutes, and you needed to not make some timely free throws just to get the game to overtime.
Right. And you can also say, okay, if Wade Taylor could have hit a shot before the end of the game, he really, really struggled, hit the one big 3, and then took a terrible one the next possession. You can go back and forth about the what ifs of this game. That's the inherent nature of a game that's so close. But this doesn't make me concerned about Houston. This is the kind of things that happen at a team that, by the way, it was not unreasonable to pick as the SEC champions beginning of the season.
Mhm.
They didn't have that kind of season, but those are the kind of guards they have. And I know Wade Taylor was not anywhere near his best in this game. They found a way with the combination of all of these different factors, and that it just makes me wonder, because I really do feel like this is the Houston team that is best equipped to actually do this. And I love this next matchup. I cannot tell you how much I love this next matchup for Houston, getting to play that Duke team. I know, Jared McCain just shot the lights out and was ridiculously good. I really, really think we're getting Houston in the Elite Eight here, but this is the slim margins, and they very easily could have gone home, and they're not, because ultimately they got the better Texas A&M in overtime.
Yeah. I don't feel any differently about Houston than I did 30 minutes ago.
Mm-hmm.
It just happens sometimes.
Yeah, they just can't do that again.
Yeah, but they hadn't done that since in a month, so they probably aren't going to do it again.
Right. The odds of that happening 2 times in 6 games. Yeah.
Since they gave up 85 on the road to Oklahoma, a game that they won 87-85, they'd given up 59, 46, 45, 59, 69, 46. So, like, they're probably not going to give up more than 80 again in the tournament, more than 70. I mean, like, that's not an unreasonable thing to suggest. So
the Big 12 championship game wasn't great either, but
sure, but that was more about their offense than their defense.
That's fair. Sure. Yeah.
Don't worry, I'm not trying to insult Iowa State there.
No,
don't worry.
No, just they've had a couple between that just terrible performance and this shaky one. They haven't exactly been the most convincing over the last few games here, but that happens sometimes.
Yeah, and I still I disagree with you, except for 2 minutes. They were completely convincing,
and that's also an important thing to remember. Yeah,
they were up by 12 against Texas A&M,
right,
after 38 minutes and collapsed, and that's something you're allowed to hold against them. But to suggest that this game was closed for 40 minutes would be a silly thing to suggest.
Right, and it probably wouldn't even have been that close.
Overtime wasn't that close either.
No.
So they played 43 pretty convincing minutes.
Mm-hmm.
It just so happened that the wheels completely fell off in those 2 minutes that they didn't.
Now the flip side to that is if Texas A&M hits free throws, it doesn't feel as convincing. But they didn't hit the free throws. Houston made them earn them, and ultimately, the better team, the team that deserved to win, won this game.
Wasn't the only overtime that we saw Pittsburgh was the place to be this weekend, man. It was
Sure
the
was.
place. It was the place to be. Let's start with the darlings of the dance thus far. Oakland, their run comes to an end in a 79-73 overtime loss to NC State. It wasn't exactly the it wasn't ex- it wasn't exactly the magical experience that was Jack Golke in the first game. 6 of 17 from the 3 point line, 22 points. He and Trey Townsend 30 points on 11 of 25 shooting. They had 52 of Oakland's 73 points. And this game was there for the taking, but ultimately DJ Burns 24-11 on 9 of 12 shooting. Just a little bit too much. Oakland has a chance, but I think this game delivered in the way that you were kind of hoping that a double-digit round of 32 matchup would. But ultimately, the high major team and a team that hasn't lost in several weeks now is on their way to the Sweet 16 in Kevin Keats's Wildcats.
Yeah, you can kind of
Sorry, Wolfpack, not Wildcat. Wolfpack. Excuse me.
You can sort of see the similarities and differences in terms of how this game played out. Like you said, it was Golke and Townsend for Oakland. It was all 5 starters for NC State, much more consistent across the board. Obviously, DJ Burns was the one who led the way and carried the scoring and playmaking burden, but he got a lot more help than Oakland Stars did. But then you look at things like the 3-point line and the free throw line, these two teams were basically identical in terms of percentages.
Sure.
So it was a very, very close game. Oakland was kind of down 5-ish most of the way, but always found a way to hang in there. It's not like they were trailing by double digits or things like that. And they had the possession. And it was a terrible final possession. But they had the opportunity to go win this game and did not get the ball to the right players. NC State survives, gets us to overtime, and that's where they really imposed their will. And ultimately, DJ Burns was just too much to handle, which is a very fair thing because he is a lot to handle. His playmaking, just the physical presence, his ability to score in multiple ways. He was really good, and the combination of him and all of the help he got was ultimately a little too much for the Golden Grizzlies in the end.
Indeed. NC State lost 5 of their last 6, lost 7 of their last 9, only beat Clemson and Boston College and Georgia Tech after January 31st. They've gone on a run that includes Louisville, Syracuse, Duke, Virginia, North Carolina, Texas Tech, and Oakland. They get the Marquette Golden Eagles next weekend. It's quite a run that doesn't change my mind about who NC State was as a team this year, but here they are still playing basketball, and they deserve credit for that.
Right. This is the perfect illustration of why it is so ridiculous to change narratives based on a set of games for a team. Kevin Keats was, to put it kindly, on the hot seat. Maybe staring at being fired. We'll never know. And then he literally saved his job by getting the contract extension to kick in by winning 5 games in 5 days in the ACC tournament. And now he's going to the Sweet 16, and we're not having any kind of conversation about his job security.
Yeah.
That is how quickly. We are talking, 7 games? That is how quickly things can change. And I do think that, and we kind of talked about this off air, that this team, if anything, this is an illustration of how much this team has underachieved this season. Because they are good from a talent perspective. I feel like they should be better than they were. But because they weren't, and now they're playing better and things have figured out, it's all working in Kevin Keats' favor. And yep, here they are. The ACC is having itself quite a tournament.
Indeed. The other OT thriller, double OT thriller, Creighton 86, Oregon 73. It was ultimately a Creighton flexing of their muscles in the second OT, ended up winning the game by 13. Before we go any further, Josh, Jermaine Couisnard,
Yep.
in the NCAA tournament, 36, 6, and 4.5 on 49, 52, 100 splits.
We did feel we were kind of going back and forth. I don't think we ever talked about it on air, but we were going back and forth about players who could just will their teams to the Sweet 16. and we were kind of going through the list, and yeah, we missed a guy.
I mean, I guess we missed a guy.
Not that he would have been an obvious selection, but clearly he was on some kind of heater here and
I
came
mean,
up just short. But
he scored 14, 20, 10, 14 in his last 4 games. Now, granted, he got a 39 bomb against Arizona on March 2nd, but it's so maybe you're right. Maybe we just missed. But those are absolutely stupid stats, even for 2 games.
yeah,
He had 40 in the just it wasn't competitive against South Carolina. It just wasn't. Had 32, 8, and 3 tonight. 13 of 33 from the field is tough. I mean, tough is probably a little bit of an exaggeration, but 6 of 12 from the 3-point line, and those numbers across 2 games are ludicrous no matter who you're playing.
and then you had the other part of this, which was we were very close to Oregon winning this game if Baylor Scheinman doesn't hit that shot to then force to tie it, and then Creighton doesn't get the stop to ultimately get this game into overtime.
Mhm.
To Oregon winning this game, having, I believe it was 1 field goal made by a player after halftime, not named Cousinard or Infalidante, and not taking a free throw until the final minute of regulation,
4 or 5.
which would just have been preposterous. And that was the world we were looking at because Creighton couldn't shoot the ball in the first half, but they were dominating the offensive glass, so they got to the free throw line. They kept themselves in the game, and then ultimately some of the threes started falling. Stephen Ashworth was huge down the stretch. Scheinman had the huge shot when they really needed it. They hit enough threes in the end that it looks pretty good, and it was enough because Oregon just got no help. It was
Mhm.
2 players,
Yeah.
and that, as good as those 2 players were in this game, and as hot as Cousinard was in this tournament, it's just hard to beat a team with this many good players when you only have 2 guys that are producing.
Yep. Yeah.
The other thing
32 from Cousinard, 28 from Dante. 28 and 20, by the way. 28 and
yeah,
20.
yeah, oh yeah,
They got 6 total field goals from anybody else, and only 2 other guys scored. It was Jackson Shelsted, Jadrian Tracy. It was not enough. Not enough.
yeah. I am fascinated by this Creighton, just real quick, by this Creighton Tennessee matchup coming here
Mm.
in the battle of teams that sometimes look really bad offensively for kind of different reasons,
Mhm.
but neither of them were all that. And Creighton again kind of got going in this game, but wasn't exactly pretty. Obviously, Tennessee had an offensive stinker. These are 2 teams that I really, really, really want to believe in, and then sometimes they just make you question everything, and then sometimes they have 5 really good games in a row, and you go, "This team's going to the Final Four."
Mm.
I'm just fascinated after these 2 shaky games where Creighton nearly got sent home and Tennessee was not particularly convincing. Which one of them shows up in this game and then potentially ultimately gets to face Purdue? But the context of this and these 2 teams, I find this matchup fascinating.
Because in a vacuum, you could tell me that those were the 2 games that those 2 teams needed to win, and
Right.
now they're it's kind of in the
Yes.
same bank as Houston.
Yep.
Like, that was the game they needed to survive.
Yep.
Is that the game that Tennessee needed to win, only scoring 62 points,
Right.
and Dalton Connect's gonna have 40 on
Right. Because
Friday?
you know one of those is coming. Yeah.
Yeah. Or will Creighton just not be able to miss, and
Right.
they'll win the game 100-98?
Right. Can Connect score 35 and it doesn't matter because Shireman has 28, Ashworth
Kinda
has
like that
20,
UNC
and
game. Kinda
right.
like the UNC Tennessee game from the regular season.
Mhm.
We'll see. Totally possible. One more thing, and then we'll get out of here. Not many top 3 seeds have lost in the NCAA tournament thus far. Baylor is one of them. 72-64. They fell to number 6 seed Clemson. 6 of 24 from the 3-point line. I'm not totally sure it needs to be more complicated than that. Jacoby Walter 20, Ray J Dennis 27. Those 2 guys were pretty good. Jacoby Walter had a nice game across the board. Didn't get a ton from anybody else. 6 of 24 from the 3-point line. Went to the free throw line a bunch, didn't really capitalize. 16 of 26 from there. And it was a 20 piece from Chase Hunter. It was double digits for 3 other guys in the Clemson starting lineup. And they're on their way to the Sweet 16.
Really impressive defensive performance by Clemson. Got to give them their props. And part of this is also Baylor just doesn't seem to have a plan B when the plan A offensive system doesn't work. Right. There's not a lot of improvising and problem solving going on, it seems like. And between the 25% from three, the 38% from the floor, and the free throw struggles, you're going to have a tough time. And Jacoby Walter, who's a really good free throw shooter, missed some really important ones. They missed front ends of 1-and-1s. They picked bad free throws to miss too, in addition to just missing a lot of them. And Dennis did his best to keep them in this game, and it looked like they had one of those kind of patented Baylor, sort of like the UNC game, the patented Baylor run to get themselves back in and kind of defy logic, and ultimately Clemson regrouped. You mentioned Chase Hunter. He was really good. Joe Girard made some big plays. Their guards were good, which is about all you need when you have Ian Shefflin doing his thing. The one shot he made without looking at the rim was just amazing. He probably couldn't do that again if he tried, but he hit it the one time he needed to. And so between those guys, you got enough, especially with what they were doing defensively and Baylor's inability to shoot the ball. And if you're looking at this from Clemson's perspective, PJ Hall was not good. PJ Hall could not stay on the floor. They still found a way to win this game. If they're going to continue further, he has, and this has been a thing all season, he has got to be smarter. The fifth foul was a little bit unfortunate where he lost the ball and he was trying to win it back. And I think I'm not sure he could have stopped if he wanted to. He just kind of barreled into, I think it was Dennis. Some Baylor player grabbed the ball and he barreled into him. The fourth one, though, he just blew up a screen. No need to do that whatsoever. I think that was the fourth foul, if I remember it correctly. They are going to need him on the floor because you're not going to be playing a team as volatile as Baylor moving forward every single game. Sometimes you just catch Baylor on the right night. Sometimes you catch him on the wrong night. They happen to catch him on the right night. But you could tell that Brad Brownell was very frustrated with what was happening with PJ Hall, and they survived this one. He's probably going to be spectacular next game. That was just the other thing in this game that I was paying attention to and thinking about was it's just they often lose when he gets into these situations, and it seems like he gets into these situations more than he should. But didn't matter in this one. They were the better team. They deserved to win. They were great defensively, and their team collectively showed up in a way that Baylor's didn't. And so here they are.
Here they are. Anything else from the last couple of days?
We will do women's exclusive content tomorrow. Got some interesting things.
There are things to talk about.
Sure are. And we're already to the point halfway through where we have more men's top 8 teams going to the Sweet 16 than women's. So that's a notable development that we will discuss.
There you go. I've got one Final Four still intact, and it's not on the women's side. It's not on the women's side. Yep, we'll do that tomorrow once the first weekend games on the women's side concludes. We'll see you on, well, technically today because it's 12:20 a.m. on Monday, March 25th. Really fun first weekend, and when you have this many good teams left on the men's side heading into the second weekend, those next 4 days at the end of this week should be awesome. So looking forward to them. That's going to do it. Under 8 podcast Sunday, March 24th. It is bleeding into Monday, March 25th. It's 12:20 a.m. It's time for bed. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your shows. Follow the Under 8 Pod on Twitter. Subscribe on YouTube. Thanks so much for being here. We will see you tomorrow.